Hey everybody, I wanted to share with you something that has to do with the escape and the rescue mentioned in the Bible. We have another amazing alignment happening this month between true Hanukkah in the Northern Hemisphere and multitude Passover. Notice they perfectly overlap from January 14th until January 21st. So we know Passover is the 14th day of the first month, as described in Leviticus 23. And Exodus says to observe unleavened bread from the 14th day of the first month until the 21st day. And this appointment in the Bible is associated with at least 4 different escapes. It's the appointment for the escape from Sodom and Gomorrah when the fire and brimstone rains down from heaven, and you can see that happen during unleavened bread. It was also the time of the escape from Egypt, the feast of unleavened bread. The same day I led your armies out of Egypt in the first month. On the 14th day of the month you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month. It's also described as a time the people shall ascend up in Joshua 5. The children of Israel kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month, and the 7th day the people shall ascend up, and they burnt the city with fire. So that implies it was the 7th day of unleavened bread. And we're also told Peter escaped from prison on unleavened bread. So then were the days of unleavened bread. Herod intended to bring Peter forth on Passover, and on that same night, the angel said to Peter, "Arise up quickly," and the chains fell off from his hand. So all of these escapes occurred in the first month during the feast or appointment of unleavened bread from the 14th to the 21st day of the first month. And I mean, we know that the traditional first month has always been observed in the springtime for thousands of years. The Jews are celebrating their first month in March and April this year with Passover and unleavened bread from the 3rd until the 11th of April. And on the ancient biblical calendar, the first month will start on April 18th. And both the standard Jewish calendar and the ancient calendar both start the first month in the spring, because even though the Bible is not specific about what season the first month should be observed, it does imply that the first month is the time of the first harvest. So that's in Leviticus 23, verse 10. When you come into the land I give you and reap the harvest, bring a sheaf of the first fruits of the harvest and wave it before the Lord. Well, that's traditionally done the day after Passover. We've talked about that in the video on the ancient calendar. It's linked below. But here's the interesting thing. On the one hand, the bringing in of the first fruits of the harvest is a literal event that has been occurring for thousands of years in the springtime. But we also know the harvest is symbolic in the Bible. It represents the rescue. So Jesus said in Matthew 13 that the wheat will be gathered into the barn at the time of the harvest. So we also know that's the time of the burning, which is the fall of Babylon and the asteroid impact. We talk about that in some of the links below this video. So the binding of the tares together has already happened by that time. The tares are bound, and then the wheat are gathered into the barn, and the burning of the tares seems to happen at the same time when you take into consideration everything else. And it also says in Matthew 13 that the wheat represent the children of the kingdom, and the harvest represents the end of the world. So it's symbolic, it's not literal. And it also says the righteous shine forth in the kingdom of their Father. That's the Father's house. So remember, he said he's preparing a place in his Father's house in heaven. And then it says here, shine forth in the Father's house. So it's basically saying shine forth in the heavens. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So it basically means this is a riddle right here. If you can understand it, then good. And it just hit me for the first time. I mean, it seems like this is the 100th time I've read this. But it just hit me now. Shine forth in the heavens may refer to the moon. I mean, we were just talking about this in the Polar Express video, because the measurements of the base of New Jerusalem mentioned in Revelation 21, it would actually fit inside the diameter of the moon. The base of it would. So, I mean, that's just a side note. I'm not going to get into that right now. But shine forth in the Father's house in heaven, or shine forth from the Father's house in heaven, shine forth as the sun. Well, I mean, the moon reflects sunlight. So, I don't know. I just noticed that. But the point here is that the harvest is not actually a literal harvest. It represents both the time of the rescue and the time of the asteroid impact. And it's also mentioned in Revelation 14 as representing the time of the fall of Babylon and the wrath of God. So we talk about that in the video on the 7 trumpets and vials of wrath. The fall of Babylon and the wrath occurs in the 7th trumpet and vial, which we are told will occur in 1 day. So it's the asteroid impact. It actually occurs in 1 hour. So that harvest burning and the gathering of the wheat into the barn seem to happen in 1 literal day when the asteroid hits the earth. But Jesus also said that those who were bidden to the wedding would not come. That's the remnant. That word literally means left behind. But instead, the nation bringing forth the fruits of the kingdom of heaven would be taken. And this also seems to be represented symbolically in the story of Esther, because it tells us that the bride Esther is taken from the common people instead of the queen. And it says the bride is taken to the king's house in the 10th month. So it's all symbolic, because Revelation tells us the queen represents Babylon the Great, which are the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, represented by the pink here. We know that. We've proven that in the videos that are linked below. The texts tell us these religions, it's basically saying these religions believe they have their place in heaven because they belong to these religions, but actually that they don't. The bride, it does say the bride will be taken out of them, but they're not taken out of those religions because they're part of those religions. They're taken out for other reasons. I mean, the bride is a multitude of all nations. There's no religious criteria involved. And Jesus also said in Matthew 24:44 that the escape will happen on a day they don't expect. So in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man comes. Well, most Christians believe it will happen in the fall or the spring, or they think it's going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets. So basically he's saying it's not going to happen on the day you think it will. So that must mean the Feast of Trumpets is not the day, and maybe not even Passover in the springtime either. Who knows? It says it's not going to happen on the day you think. And also in 2 Peter 3:10 it says it's going to come like a thief in the night. So the majority will not be expecting it when it hits. So it kind of makes sense to me. I don't know. I'm just pointing this out. Most Christians do not expect it in the month of January or February because it's in the winter in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's also not in the Jewish first month or the 7th month, like we were just saying. But because Jesus said it's not the Christians or the Jews who will be taken in that rescue, but a multitude of all nations, then it also kind of makes sense that maybe the rescue's not going to occur when the Christians and the Jews think it's going to happen, because it's not the Christians that, you know what I'm saying? It's not the Christians that are going to be taken. Even though, I mean, again, some of them will be, but it's not a religious thing. It's really not. So that's why we look at the multitude calendar, because the most common calendar in the world is the Gregorian calendar. And what if God meant all along that the first month is the month of the harvest, meaning the first month of the multitude? I mean, what if the texts were referring to the symbolic harvest all along, meaning the harvest of the first month is the rescue? You know what I'm saying? Because the whole reason that the Jews and all these other people for thousands of years believed that the first month should start in the springtime is because it says take the first sheaf of your harvest and wave it before the Lord. So the only way they could do that if it was occurring in the literal month of the harvest. But what if the texts were always symbolic from the beginning? If they were always symbolic and it always meant the rescue when it used the word harvest, then that means, as far as I can tell, there isn't anything in the Bible that specifically says it has to start that the first month is in the springtime. So I'm just pointing that out. What if it really does just mean the rescue, and it meant that the whole time, and it didn't really mean that it has to start in the springtime? I don't know. But again, 4 of the escapes in the Bible happen in the first month during unleavened bread. So that is sort of a clue. It sort of clues us in that the escape will happen in the first month. But then we have all these other clues that indicate it's in the 10th month, or that it's at the 7th day of a feast, and all these other things. We talked about this last year as well. You might remember that. We were talking about the January convergence, but you'll notice that last year, the 7th day of Hanukkah, which by the way is also the first day of the 10th month, that it landed on January 1st and 2nd, but it did not align with multitude unleavened bread, like the Gregorian calendar 14th day of the month. It did not align last year, but this year it does. It lines up perfectly with unleavened bread, which is unusual because, well, I mean, the 14th day of the first month on the Gregorian calendar is always the 14th day of January. We know that. But the 24th day of the 9th month on the ancient biblical calendar, which is what this says right here, that depends on when the new moon is, because the new moon is the first day of that month. So you might notice this new moon right before Christmas. I said right here that it was the multitude first month because that was the 13th new moon from January of last year, because you might remember the new moon landed on January 1st last year, which was the first day of the Gregorian calendar, or the multitude calendar. And that was also rare. So we were keeping track of those new moons for the multitude calendar for the whole year. And this one right here would have started the new year on the multitude calendar if we continued following the new moons. So that does call attention to the 4th through the 6th right here, because that would be Passover, which is the 14th day from this new moon, if that was the start of the first month. So I did add that right here, but and who knows, I mean, but the point of the multitude calendar though is that it's the Gregorian calendar. It's the calendar that most of the people on the planet follow right now. And last year we watched the new moons because they started on January 1st. But again, the point is it's the Gregorian calendar and it starts on January 1st. So if the true meaning of the harvest in Leviticus 23 is that it represents the escape, then it's referring to the escape of the multitude, not the escape of the Jews, not the escape of the Christians. It's the escape of a multitude of all nations, which do include some Jews and some Christians and some Muslims as well, and everybody else. And the multitude, the majority of all nations on the planet right now, observe the first month starting on January 1st. And the 14th day of that month this year is aligning with true Hanukkah, which is always the 24th day from the new moon. You see what I mean? So the 14th day of the first month on the Gregorian calendar this year lines up with the first day of true Hanukkah, counting from the new moon. And that is really, really rare. But there is so much more to this that blew my mind, and I want to share it with you. I have to stop part 1 right here. I'll put the link to part 2 below.